Welcome to Social Sciences Basic Issues with Dr. Adam Golob. Today, I'm going to cover some of the most common issues I have encountered as a professor of political science under Social Sciences Department. After many years of teaching, these issues recur more and more frequently, and recent political turmoil has resulted in a polarization of some of these issues. I hope today to cover opinion versus research, normative versus empirical, student versus teacher, rhetoric versus critical thinking, ideology, bias, and perspective. Hopefully, a review of these common issues will help future and current students to move forward in this discipline. To begin, opinion versus research. Everyone has opinions. It can't be helped, and it really shouldn't be. Opinions are simply judgments that we have about the world as we see it. These judgments have no particular requirement that they are based in anything. It might be my opinion that cheese pizza is superior to pepperoni pizza, simply because I prefer the taste. Opinions are only useful insofar as they help us to start conversations. Everyone has opinions, and everyone believes that his or her opinion is superior to other people's opinions. Thus, opinions are absolutely no basis for arguments, conversations, discourse, political, social topics. The only way we can have relevant discussions about these topics, especially if these topics are ones about which people feel passionately, is by relying on research. Research, contradictory to opinion, is based on data, analysis, historical records, interviews, statistics, and the like. Research can be separate from opinion. I may undergo research that completely countermines my very opinion on the topic. I may research and find that 90% of individuals prefer pepperoni over cheese pizza, that pepperoni pizza has significantly better nutritional value, that pepperoni pizza is cheaper, easier to make, better for the environment, all these things. And through my research, I realized that my opinion is wrong. Now, it may or may not change my opinion, because when I eat the pizza, I still prefer the taste of cheese. And thus, it is quite conceivable that your opinion and the research you take on a topic might not coincide, and that's okay. But research is the foundation for facts, and facts in the social sciences is what we're after. If I publish a paper that says I prefer the taste of cheese pizza over pepperoni pizza, you can bet that the utility of that paper would be negligible. No one needs to read it. That information is totally useless to the outside world. But if I publish a paper on the health benefits of pepperoni pizza, how it's better for the environment, how it's the preferred pizza of choice in 100 countries, yada, 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 this becomes more useful. And that, in the social sciences, is what we're after. The facts and the utility, and the generalization. Another common issue is normative versus empirical. Normative is subjective. What this means is that a normative assessment or a normative judgment is tied to the speaker and not to the object of the speech. This is just another level of the opinion versus research. Now we're talking about, well, what kind of research, what kind of thought are we moving forward? What kind of thought are we using as we move forward? So in social sciences, normative is only useful in a theoretical sense. Normative assessments make judgments like better, good, great. These sort of normative assessments are linked to opinion, are linked to subjectivity. And like opinions, a normative assessment of a situation has minimum utility. Now, when we're talking about theories and we're talking about philosophy, it is fully permissible and even encouraged that the type of thought that we use is normative thought, because you can't test a philosophical theory, and so we have to use it based on a normative assessment of the situation. But in the social sciences, when we're dealing with topics like, American government or sociology or economics, normative assessments of well, is the American dollar better than the British euro? It doesn't matter. There is no, the terms for better, best, good, all of that have no bearing on the field. Because what does it matter if the American dollar is better? What we need to know is, how does it relate to the euro? Is it a harder currency, a softer currency? Is it used in more or fewer countries? Is its power on the international market more or less secure? So better or worse, greatest, none of that matters. So if a student, for example, turns in a paper to me that says the Constitution is one of the greatest documents ever written, that's just a grandiose opinion, and therefore useless in the field of American government. Empirical, on the other hand, is testable, and it leads to truth as best as we can find it. So an empirical is the scientific. It's where you have hypotheses, where you have tests, and where you have results, and where you're striving for correlation and causation, and all of these science fair project type terms. Empirical creates data, and these data can be argued, debated, retested, verified, changed if the occasion calls for it, if new data are created. So empirical leads us to a collection of things which can transcend individuals. So under a normative assessment, if I believe that the American government is the best government in the world, no one can debate that with me, because let's say someone else decides that Russia is the best government in the world. We have no basis to argue this except for opinion, theory, philosophy. However, if we have empirical data sets to back us up, if I can say, well, the standard of living in the United States is double that of Russia, and my colleague says, well, but the happiness index indicates that Russians are far more satisfied with life, and that they have a higher trust in government, and so forth and so on. We can go back and forth. Now we have something to debate, something to discuss, something tangible. Student versus teacher. It's a known fact that students are here to learn from teachers. And quite frequently, this creates a little bit of conflict, right? So students come to every class with a living knowledge base. Students do not show up to class with a blank slate mentality. They're not there as open canvases just waiting to be painted upon. In truth, students come to class, every student comes to a class with an already fixed mindset, perspective, ideology, worldview, all of those things. That's because every human being has to have one in order to live. The teacher also comes with all of those things. Now, it is the job of the teacher to take apart the student's fortress of perspective and ideology, and to allow for a new knowledge base to be created that mixes new information with old knowledge in new ways. The reason that students attend my American government class is not because they've never heard of American government. It's because they're there to learn more, to broaden knowledge, to broaden perspective, to alter ideology, to learn facts and statistics. And yet, I have encountered over the years that students who may be even high school students dual enrolled in the college believe themselves to enter the classroom on the same footing, with the same stamina of perspective and the same ideological truths as I, a doctor in my field. This is where some of the divide comes. When I get into a discussion with a student and I'm attempting to help that student pick through ideology, pick through past perspectives, and to figure out where there are gaps, where there are holes that have been filled in by opinion or family perspective or anecdotal evidence. And then there's pushback from the student. And while it is true that students learn from teachers and that teachers learn from students, this is in a different way. It's not to say that students bring to the classroom new information about American government that I, as the professor of American government, didn't know. What teachers learn from students is a new shared perspective. And from everyone we teach, we are witness to a new perspective and a new ideology, which allows for better understanding of students in general. It's like a single new data set of information, or a single new datum of information has been added to our collection of data. So this is how teachers learn from students. Of course, there's always pushback. Learning is hard. Learning is difficult. Learning takes apart our reality of the world and requires us to alter it. So if we're learning new things about topics we already felt we didn't know much about, it's not as difficult. But if we're learning new things about topics that we were sure of, and the new information counters what we were absolutely sure of, then we have pushback because we have what's called cognitive dissonance. We can't figure out how what we know to be true counters this new truth we're being presented with. And this is where the student versus teacher issues crop up. Rhetoric versus critical thinking is another major roadblock in the social sciences. So we live in a social world. Thus, the discipline of social sciences is always on us, around us, among us, unlike some of the other fields that one might study. So for example, if you are an engineer, it is unlikely that at the moment you entered engineering school, you were flooded with engineering concepts and ideologies and perspectives that change your worldview on engineering. But if you're in the social sciences, and particularly I'm speaking here of political science, which is my field, you grow up being inundated with perspective and rhetoric and ideology and propaganda regarding political science. So by the time you enter school, by the time you enter the field of political science, you already have an established base on this discipline, even though 9 times out of 10, it's rhetoric. So rhetoric are words and thoughts that have no basis beyond propaganda. So rhetoric would be blind patriotism. Rhetoric would be America is the best country in the world. Rhetoric would be Americans are the freest people in the world, or this is the land of opportunity. Rhetoric would be I pledge my allegiance and that we are one nation, even though critical thinking wise in political science, the United States does not qualify as a nation. So I have students who tell me, well, when we pledge allegiance to one nation, therefore we must be a nation. And our nation has 50 states, so therefore we must not be a state. So these rhetorical words, these layman's terms, confuse students when they enter the discipline of political science because, in effect, the United States is not a nation. The United States is a state, and the 50 states that we have are not really states at all, because one of the defining traits of a state is that it be sovereign. And since the federal government can step in and tell the states what to do, they're clearly not sovereign. Rhetoric relies on a turtles all the way down logic, which is a fallacy. So anyone who's not familiar with turtles all the way down logic comes to a little story where there was an anthropologist talking to an individual and asked about the position of the earth. And the tribesman says that the earth rested on the back of, I can't remember what animal it was, rested on the back of a whale. And that's what kept the earth up. So the anthropologist pushed and said, well, what is the whale on then? And the person said, well, the whale sits on the back of an enormous snake. The anthropologist continued to push. Well, what is the snake on then? The tribesman responded, well, the snake is on the back of a turtle. Anthropologist pushed again. Well, then what's the turtle on? The tribesman scratched his head for a minute and said, well, after that, it's pretty much turtles all the way down. So this story indicates that, well, at some point, you have to realize that what you've built upon, the logical foundation somewhere along the lines, is based on nothing. If you can trace your belief system back far enough, you believe it simply because you believe it. So if you tell me that America is the greatest nation in the world, and I say, well, why is that? Well, because we have the best people. Okay, according to what? Well, our people are the freest. According to what? And you see, we go back and forth until at some point you have to believe it simply because you believe it. And this is the fallacy of rhetoric. Critical thinking, on the other hand, the opposite of rhetoric, involves questioning everything that is handed to us. If someone tells you that America is the greatest country in the world, you respond with, according to what metric? If someone tells you that the Constitution is the most well-written document of all time, then you say, why? Who said that? What's your unit of greatness? Critical thinking creates a mindset of logic and reasoning. It creates in us, while true, a bit of skepticism, and it must not be, you can't take it so far as to literally not be able to live because you question everything. But it does create a bit of skepticism as far as ideological thought goes, in that we can't rely on turtles all the way down logic. We have to find a basis for logical arguments in more logic. Ideology, bias, and perspective, the last issues that I'll cover here, are another one of the most egregious issues that I have encountered as a teacher of the social sciences for all these years. Ideology has a relatively simple definition. It is a system of beliefs that influence action. And despite its simple definition, I firmly believe it to be one of the most powerful determinants of society and of the individual ever. So one of the most common ideological beliefs that influences action is the belief that if you work hard, you'll get ahead in life. This, of course, influences the actions of people who go and work hard in order to try to get ahead. Despite the fact that the United States has one of the lowest social mobility rates in the developed world, and despite the fact that statistics after statistics show that people who work hardest actually don't get ahead in life, that the people who are the furthest in life are either inherited money or create some sort of invention of something new, or marry into money, or just luck. Studies show that working hard has very little effect on social class, economic class, etc. And yet, people continue to work hard under this ideological belief. Ideological beliefs can be individual. Ideological beliefs can be societal. The thing you remember here is that ideology is created and yours was given to you and can be altered, as were all of ours. So from birth on, we were handed our ideology by our social influences, by our agents of socialization, mainly parents, siblings, religious institutions, schools, television, radio, the music we listen to. All of these create our ideological beliefs. It's amazing to see that a strong ideological belief can overrule all logic and reason. Democratic ideology, Republican ideology are stronger than individual judgments on situations. I have students who email me and tell me that the internment camps under Franklin Delano Roosevelt were part of our checkered past, and that we're finally to a better place, which is the rhetoric given to us in our history books and on our televisions and by our politicians, when truth be told, we are not to a better place. We have right now uh, a war on brown people, whereas in the past we had, war on Asian people, or war on Irish people, or war on Native Americans, or the like. There's never been a moment in history, in American history, where the greater American government was not against some subset of people. And we may not have internment camps, but we do have these border prisons where we have families and children in cages, much like the internment camps of World War II. So ideology, the best way I can think of to equate it, ideology is as powerful as George Orwell's Doublethink from 1984. And if you're unfamiliar with that, you should look that up. Okay, bias. Bias is omnipresent. Bias is human. We are all biased. Everything that we do, we have bias. We have opinion, and there's no way to get around it. I have an assignment in one of my classes where I ask the students to review media sources and find out which one is the least biased. And it never fails. There's always a handful of students who come back and say, well, this report was unbiased. Okay, there's no such thing as unbiased. We are humanly flawed in the fact that we have bias for a situation. Every story is framed. Every judgment is biased. There's just no way around it. You can't tell a story without a frame. We just have to be aware of it, and we have to acknowledge it, and we have to face it. It's the only way to handle bias. Finally, perspective. Perspective is limited to your own collection of experiences, thoughts, and context, and perspective is never right. Technically, I guess you could say it's never wrong either, although that one could probably be argued. Here we have the situation with the blind scientists exploring the elephant. So it's impossible to see the whole picture from everyone else's perspective. Thus, your perspective is never right. Perspective gives us a lens through which to view the world, and our own perspective can change and shift and broaden and magnify and all that, but we'll never have all the perspectives out there. And until we have all the perspectives out there, we can't possibly see the entire picture. So there's no way to avoid that. There's no way to fix that. We just have to be aware of the fact that our perspective is nothing more than our perspective, and that in any given situation, there's no way to have more than our perspective. But we can be aware of others' perspectives and have them share and learn from their perspectives, and it might help our perspective to grow. So yeah. And this concludes my basic issues in the social sciences. There are, of course, plenty more issues out there, but these are the ones that I felt really needed to be addressed, that I wanted to share today. I'll end you with a little quote of my own. Social sciences are sciences in the way that we do our discipline. As such, we must remain vigilant in our trade so as to see results that are tried, tested, and, to our best ability, true. Thank you for listening today. Hope this has helped. Feel free to comment.